Hey, what's up? I'm Norris and welcome back to another sew along. Today we'll be working on one of my latest Know Me pattern drop, which is ME2036, a utility jacket. Now this was a really fun jacket to construct, and some of the highlight details are the shoulder vents and also the welt pockets in the front. Okay, real quick, before getting started, I want you to know that this is an order of construction video, and if you're new to sewing or just need a refresher course, I would like for you to visit sewedacademy.com and take advantage of our free trial. Okay, so again, like I said before, we're using my latest Know Me pattern design, which is ME2036, and it's a utility jacket. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So go grab a front. You should have your binding box marked off in chalk or either a marking pen that you can remove later. And then you'll need both of your pocket bags for your welt pocket. And this is actually the welt. Okay, so first go ahead and grab your welt, fold it in half, wrong sides facing. Give it a really good press. And once you give it a good press, we're going to take our lining. So our lining is facing up right now. So once you face it with the wrong sides facing up, it'll look just like this. But before we apply it to our front, we need to go ahead and baste it. We're going to match up this side right here with the raw edge of the welt. All right, just like that. And we're going to pin. Go ahead and pin it in place. Okay, so there should be two markings. I'll put notches for my markings. For the opening of the pocket, you'll see the seam allowance on both sides. So go ahead and head to the machine, and we're going to bait stitch, starting at one end where our marking is and going all the way up to the other end. Okay, starting on one side, we're going to back stitch at the beginning and then also at the end using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that we have that basting stitch with our lining and welt, we're going to line up that basting stitch with the binding box line that's on the bottom here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put my pin at the end, and then on the other side, as you can see my pin, I'm going to place that on the end, that binding box there, so I know that it is in the exact same place. Okay, so now we're just going to go to the machine and we're just going to follow that basting stitch guide from up top all the way down to the bottom, right where that stitch starts and where it ends, using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then also while we're at the machine, you want to go ahead and take your other pocket bag and we're going to turn it up like this, right sides facing. And then we're going to pin this in place. Okay, so we have both pinned and both of the raw edges is touching each other, and it's both right sides facing. This is right sides facing with the front piece, and this is right sides facing as well. So let's head to the machine and do both of our stitches. Okay, on the lining side, I'm gonna go ahead and put my needle exactly where it needs to be. And I'm basically just following my guide. And this side on the right is also 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so we're back from the machine and both pocket bags are stitched down. So before I cut into my front, I just wanted you to know I use a strip of interfacing to go across where we're going to cut into, just to stabilize the fabric just a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and make a snip in the center. And then now we're just going to find where I cut, and then we're going to go all the way until we get to about 5/8 of an inch away from the end here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my scissors and cut diagonally to my stitching. Okay? And then the same thing in the other direction. Okay? And that's going to create a little triangle, as you can see right here. And then now we're going to do it in the other direction. Okay, so now let's just turn everything to the inside. Make sure you take your welt pocket ends and turn them to the inside. Okay, now head to your pressing table and give this a really good press. Okay, so we're back from the pressing table. This is how it looks with the wrong side facing up. Nice and clean. You want to press that seam allowance at the top, towards the top. And then on this side, you'll see you have a nice welt. So I'm gonna leave it wrong side facing up right now because we need to close out the sides. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin it. And I want to stitch it kind of like this. So I'm gonna turn the right side facing up like this, and then we're just gonna pull back. And then I'm gonna pull this side back a little bit, and we're only gonna grab this little corner here. Okay. Now we're gonna head to the machine. I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna close out the side. And then I'm going to get here and pivot and then go all the way down. And then on this side, we're going to close out that side, that corner, and then come all the way down to the end. Okay, so we're just going to basically start on one side of the triangle and come down to the other end. I'm going to pivot here. So now you can see the end of it closed out. Just like this, it's secured. And it's secured on this side. So now we're going to spin it around. We're going to start at the bottom here. Okay, so now you want to make sure to check the other side, making sure that your triangle is all facing the right. So you want to grab that and hold on to it. There we go. And now you can see that we have that welt closed out right here. All right, moving right along. As you can see, I went ahead and did a serge stitch all the way across one side, across the top where that seam allowance is, and then around this curve. And then I basted the bottom together just to keep it together during the order of construction. And then next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and work on our front pocket so we can place it on our left side only. It only goes on the left side, okay? So with this welt pocket, you wanna do the same exact steps. Just rewind and look at it all the way through so you can do the other side. And then now, like I said, we're gonna work on our front pocket. So you want to serge across the top. I serge across the sides and then the bottom because my fabric frays a bit. But you only have to do the top. And once you do that, you want to fold back on your fold line. Pin both sides. And now head to the machine. We're going to stitch now one side across the bottom and then up the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Your flap, one should be interfaced, right sides facing like this. Go ahead and put my pins in. And for this one, we're gonna use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? So not 5/8, 3/8. We're gonna start on the side, go all across the bottom, and then up the other side. You wanna do both of these, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just trim down these corners. I'm gonna trim about a 1/4 inch away from the stitching. And then just cut the little end piece off. And then we're just going to turn it right sides facing, turn the corners out. Now head to your machine and give this a really good press. And then we're going to press that seam allowance. And that's why we stitched it 5/8 of an inch all the way around, so we can turn that 5/8 of an inch upward and give this entire pocket a good press. Okay, so we're back from the pressing table and I pressed all the way around. As you can see, this is pressed up. And then I went and I did a stitch all the way across where my stitching line is, just to close out that fold underneath. And then now what we're gonna do is we're gonna place it where our markings are. And it's probably gonna disappear a little bit because of the print, but you'll see it once I start pinning. Pin sides, bottom. And then what you're gonna do is just gonna head to your machine and we're gonna edge stitch. So get very close to the edge, back stitch at the beginning, down the sides, pivot across the bottom, and then up the other side, and you'll be done with your pocket. And then with the flap, let's go ahead and trim some of this down. Okay. Turn it right side out. Okay. After you turn it right side out, you want to give this a really good press. And then also, you can top stitch a 1/4 inch away from the side all the way around. And this is the time where you want to go ahead and do your buttonhole. Now, if you want to switch it up and do snaps, anything like that, you can do it. But you wouldn't have to do that until the end. But if you're doing the buttons specifically, this pattern calls for denim buttons. And if you're doing buttons, no matter what kind of buttons you're doing, you will need buttonholes. So go ahead and do your buttonholes after you press and do your stitching. Okay, so we're back from the machine. And then also a 1/4 inch away from that stitch towards the inside, you want to do your second row of top stitching. All right, and then now that we have our top stitching, we have our buttonhole on our flap, we're gonna take our edge, the raw edge of the top of the flap, and we're gonna place it on the raw edge of our front. And it's gonna be just like this, okay? So you can base this down real quick, or you can just take your front yoke, as you can see, lay it down so you can see the shape. We're just basically gonna take the shape of that, and we're right sides facing, we're gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna pin all of these together. And then we're gonna head to the machine and we're going to stitch all the way across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So head to your machine, do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, as you can see, we went ahead and attached the front yoke to the front, and that flap is enclosed with that seam. And then I pressed that seam upward, gave it a good surge, and then I just top stitched it a 1/4 inch away from that seam here. So next we're gonna move along to our placket. You should have one interface and then one that's not interface. And the one that's interface, you wanna find where that notch side is, and we're going to press in 5/8 of an inch, the seam allowance, and we're gonna trim it down to 3/8 of an inch, just like this, okay? And this is the top because you can see the marking in the center. And then at the bottom, the marking should be in the corner here, okay? So this was my notch side. I turned up 5/8 of an inch and trimmed it down to 3/8. And then once you do that, and we're just basically going to pin it on the opposite side. So this is the notch side here. This side right here, we're going to place it to the end and pin. And we're going to start at the bottom here. We're going to stitch all the way up using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then when we get here, we're going to pivot to the top. And then once we get to the dot, we're going to pivot and then go straight up. Okay? So let's head to the machine and knock that out. Then now we get to the end, we're going to pivot. And then once we get to our small dot, we're going to pivot one more time, and we're just going to go straight up. Okay, now before we trim, I'm gonna go ahead and cut into that corner here at the top, not through, but just to it. And after I do that, I'm just gonna trim some of that off on that side. And then I'm gonna continue trimming my corner. Okay, so we've done our understitching. We done turned it right side out, gave it a good press. And this is how it looks on this side here. And then now we're gonna take it right sides facing. And we're just basically going to line it up first with our double notch. Okay, so now just head to the machine and we're just basically going to stitch starting on one side, going all the way down to the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you want to do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine. I went ahead and trimmed down the seam allowance to 3/8 of an inch and I pressed my seam allowance towards the placket. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to take our placket and we're going to take that folded edge and we're going to place it just over that stitching. And then on the front side, I'm going to pin right in the center where the seam is, catching that fold underneath. And then we're going to stitch in the ditch once we get to the machine. Okay, now we're going to head to the machine. On the right side, we're going to stitch in the ditch, catching that fold underneath and closing out that placket on this side. Okay, so we're back from the machine, and as you can see, we closed out that fold underneath. And now just go to your pressing table and give this a good press. And you want to do your other front the same exact way, minus this pocket here. There's only one pocket, it only goes on the left side. But if you want it on both sides, this design allows you to do that. Just cut out double of what you need and then put this in the same placement on the other side. Okay, now I'm going to move along to the back real quick. So you want to grab your back piece. We're going to take pattern piece number 9, which should be interface, and we're going to line it up just like this. Pin a couple of times. So then we're going to stitch starting at the top, go all the way down here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, we're back from the machine. I'm going to go ahead and trim this seam allowance down to about 1/4 inch. Then now head to your pressing table. We're going to fold this to the inside. Give it a really good press, and then we're going to top stitch 1/4 inch away from the end here. So do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, I'm back from the machine. As you can see, when I went ahead and did my top stitching here, and I gave it a good press. I'm going to turn this wrong side facing for just a moment. At the right side's facing of my pattern piece number 10 and pattern piece number 9, which is right here. And I'm just going to align this side right here up. So now we're just going to head to the machine. I'm going to move the back piece out the way, and we're just going to start here and go all the way down to the bottom using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and finished off my seam here with a serge, and then I based across the top here and I based across the side, and then now we have a little shoulder vent, as you can see. So once you do this to one side, you want to do it to your other side, and then once you have both back pieces the same way, go ahead and line them up in the center back, and we're going to pin, and make sure you pin your notches first. Okay, so now I'm going to start at the bottom, go all the way up to the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then once I do that, I'm going to probably finish off my seam with a serge. And after I do that, I'm going to press to one side and then top stitch 1/4 inch away from the seam. Do all of that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, like I said, I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and did a serge on my seam and then top stitch after I pressed it towards the left. And then now we're gonna go ahead and just grab our front pieces, right sides facing. I'm gonna go ahead and pin one side for you. So we're gonna pin our shoulders. Then after you do your shoulders, we're going to pin the side seam. You want to pin the other side the same way. And then after you do that, we're just gonna head to the machine. We're gonna stitch across our shoulders and then also our side seams using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna finish off my seams with a serge. You can do a zigzag stitch if you don't have a serging machine and press your seams. After you do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. As you can see, I have my shoulders attached and I serge the edge and press my seams. Okay, so now that we've reached this point, I'm gonna go ahead and put this to the side for just a really quick moment, and we're gonna work on our sleeves. So there should be a little dot. I put a notch right here to indicate where we stop at on one of the ends. So let me grab my undersleeve. And right here, that's when I'm gonna pin. So we can stop stitching right there. And then on this side, I'm gonna bring it over here. There should be a notch. Okay, so we're gonna head to the machine. On this side, we're gonna stitch all the way to the hem using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then on this side, where we have our marking, we're gonna back stitch the beginning and stitch all the way until we get to our marking. Back stitch and cut your thread. And we're gonna do that using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so head to the machine, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. As you can see, I haven't serged yet because I want to kind of finish off this side split real quick before we do any serging. So there should be a marking here where we stop, and that's where the side split is gonna be, like I was saying. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to do a clip into that side right where the stitching stops. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm gonna head to the pressing table and I'm going to fold a 1/4 inch and then I'm gonna fold again 3/8 of an inch. And that'll give me a clean finish like you can see right here. Then I'm gonna grab a pin and go ahead and pin it all in place. And then the same thing on this side. Now you can give it a good press so it can stay in place just a little bit better. And then we're gonna head to the machine, and then on the right side, I'm going to top stitch on this side, catching the fold underneath. So let's head to the machine and knock that out. Okay, so now you just wanna feel to see where that fold is underneath, and we're just gonna top stitch. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I gave my split here a good clean finish, and then I serged the rest of that. That's why we clipped into it, so you can get a good serge all the way up. And then the other one, we serged it. And then after you do that, you wanna go ahead and press the side where you have the split at the bottom towards the undersleeve, and then the other seam allowance, you want to press it away from the undersleeve. But we're gonna head back to the machine real quick because I want to do a little zigzag here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn it right side out. So we're just gonna go to the machine. We're gonna zigzag right here where that split meet up to the seam, just to give it a little bit more support when it opens. Okay, so we're back from the machine, as you can see. And then next, what we're gonna do is we're going to attach our cuff to our sleeve. Now, on the interface side, you wanna go ahead and turn up on the side that has the notches. Turn it up 5/8 of an inch and then trim it down to 3/8 of an inch. And after you do that, right side's facing. Now the knot side is going to be towards the top here, and then we're going to pin this side, going to pin across the top here, and then along this side. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to make sure that we keep this pressed up like this, and starting where that fold is, we're going to back stitch, pivot here, go along the side, and then down this side here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're back from the machine. Let's go ahead and trim it down. Now there's one step I did forget to do. We want to go ahead and do your understitching. So make sure that you keep your seam allowance towards your right. Just fold this over and then do your understitching. Okay, now that I have it understitched, go ahead and just turn it right side out. Point out all my corners. Okay, so now head to your pressing table, give it a good press, and then we're going to attach it to our sleeve. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and attach our cuff to our sleeve. So right side is facing, you want to take your cuff, and the pointed side here is supposed to be in the direction of the side split. Now let's head to the machine and stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so while we're still here, I'm gonna come around to our sleeve cap, and I'm gonna switch our stitching to a basting stitch. There should be dots, but I did notches, so you should have a dot on both sides of the sleeve cap. And I'm gonna go ahead and do 2 rows of basting stitches so I can do a gathers. So you wanna back stitch at the beginning, but not at the end. Take my needle out, pull my threads, and then we're gonna do a second row. And then now we're just basically going to gather both sides by pulling. And then that should make the top of your sleeve cap curl up just like that. Okay, we're back from the machine. As you can see, the sleeve cap. And then now we're gonna go ahead at the bottom and we're gonna trim this down to about 3/8 of an inch, that seam allowance. Okay, and now we're gonna press the seam allowance towards the cuff. And then after we do that, we're gonna go ahead and pin right in the center of the seam, but we're gonna be catching the fold underneath, just like that. And it's the same way we pinned and sewed our placket closed. So now let's head over to the machine, and once again, we're going to stitch in the ditch. So we've done this before, I don't have to show this again. So just basically take your needle right in the center, stitch all the way in the ditch, catching that fold underneath. And everything we did to this sleeve, you want to do your other sleeve the same exact way, and then we're going to attach it to our jacket. Okay, as you can see, the inside of my cuff, the outside of it, everything looks complete and finished. One thing I do is just give it a good little press, and then now we're going to work on attaching it to our jacket. Super easy. What you want to do first, you want to make sure that you have it on the right side, so match up your front and back notches. And once you do that, so we're going to line that front notch like that. I'm just going to hold on to it, and then I'm going to work from the inside. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin that real quick. Match up your dots. Now if you pull too much for your gathering, you can disperse it across the rest of your sleeve. If you don't have enough, you can pull a little bit more to get more gather. Okay, so now that we have it all pinned, we're gonna head to the machine and stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're back from the machine, went ahead and attached both of our sleeves, as you can see, and I finished off that seam allowance with a serge. And for right now, we're gonna go ahead and work on our collar. So with the one that is interfaced, this is your facing part of your collar. You want to press up your seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, and then trim it down to 3/8 of an inch as I've done right now. And we're doing that to the notch side, okay? So now you want to bring this up and we're going to pin across the top and then down the sides, leaving the bottom free. Okay, let's head to the machine. We're going to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end, going up across the top and then down to the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're back from the machine. Let's go ahead and trim our corners and trim down our seam allowance to about 3/8 of an inch. You can turn it right side out, give it a good press, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, now we're back from the pressing table. Make sure all of our corners are pressed. And now we're going to attach this to our neckline. And then we're going to pin. Okay, now we're going to head to the machine and just starting on one side, we're going to backstitch at the beginning. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to do a basic straight stitch all the way across to the other side. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine. I've attached one side of my collar to the jacket, and I'm going to keep this seam allowance because this is my neckline. I like to keep it a little bit with a little bit more fabric right there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just taking that fold pressed edge and putting it right over my stitching because we're going to stitch in the ditch once again. Just going to take that pin and put it right in the center of the seam, catching that fold underneath right here. Okay, so I'm going to show you this one more time because this is the collar. So let's go ahead and head to the machine and we're going to stitch in the ditch. Like I said, we're going to stitch right in the ditch, catching that fold underneath. Okay, now that you can see we're back from the machine, we have the collar closed on the inside by stitching in the ditch. And the only thing you have to do now is just top stitch a 1/4 inch away from the side, across the top, and then down the other side. And then now let's go ahead and close out the hem, the bottom of the jacket. Here's the band for the bottom of the jacket. And I went ahead and pressed along the side that has no notches. The unnotched side, you want to press up 5/8 of an inch and then trim that down to 3/8 of an inch, as you can see right here, all the way down. And then once you do that, you want to find your fold line and fold that back onto itself, right sides facing. I'll do that one more time. You just want to fold that back on the fold line, making sure that your folded edge stays up. And then I'm just going to pin. And then same thing on the other side, fold it back on it to itself. So now you want to head to the machine and we're going to stitch both sides using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now we're back from the machine. I'm going to go ahead and trim that corner down a little bit. Right side out. Okay, so after you give this a good press, we can go ahead and attach it to our jacket. Okay, so as you can see, I'm gonna start on one side. It looks just like this. The inside here is folded under and it's 5/8 of an inch shorter than the other side. And we're going to just basically attach it right sides facing, and we're gonna pin. And when we pin, we want to make sure we keep the folded edge free. Okay, so now let's head to the machine. We're going to start on one side and just stitch all the way to the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine. I went and stitched all the way across, and then I trimmed my seam allowance down to about 3/8 of an inch. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that seam allowance and we're going to tuck it and put it on the inside. Okay, just like that. And then once again, we're going to pin in the center of that seam so we can stitch in the ditch. Okay, so it's all pinned, and we've been stitching in the ditch this entire project. So head to the machine. Once again, put your needle in the middle of that seam, stitch all the way through, catching the fold underneath to close out the bottom band. Okay, so do that, come back, and we'll finish up. Okay, so I'm back from the machine, and you can see that we stitched in the ditch, and this side is finished on the band. And real quick, before we finish all the way up, I just want to show you a real quick, easy tip that I got from my guy Alex, Alexandria_the_Taylor on social media. I saw a cool trick that he did with my moto jacket pattern because it has the same shoulder vents. He basically takes elastic and measure it from side to side. Cut that part off. And right here towards the bottom, he tacks this down. And what this prevents is your shoulder vent getting out of place. Once you get out of place, it'll basically snap back. Okay, so let me show you. Go ahead and turn it right side out. So sometimes your shoulder vent can get pushed out like this, and having that elastic snaps it right back in place. Okay, so shout out to Alex on that. So there you have it. You just want to tack it down on both sides just like that, and that'll keep that vent in place. Okay, so last but not least, you want to make sure that you do your buttonholes on your cuff, and then add your buttons to the other side. You want to do that for both sleeves. Your buttonholes on your left, and then your buttons on your right. Also, don't forget your button on your pocket that goes on your left side if you did just that one. And other than that, you give it a good press and you're all done. All right, congratulations. Now, I hope you enjoyed this course, and feel free to tag me on all of your amazing makes at Norris Danta Forward, Simplicity Creative Group, and Dope Men Sew Official.